Welcome back, everyone. We're getting a lot of new information coming out this week about the man accused of trying to blow up a Northwest Airlines plane. Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalib attended a religious seminar in Houston back in 2008, and reporter David Mattingly has the story.
Within weeks of acquiring a visa to travel to the United States in 2008, Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalib attended a seminar on Islamic studies in Houston, Texas. Classes similar to this one, photographed in Toronto, were scheduled in early August by the Al-Maghreb Institute, a school that claims to be the largest Islamic studies student body in North America.
What is Al-Maghreb Institute?
The Institute's website promises seminars that are fun, engaging, and information-packed. One instructor tells CNN Abdul Muttalib was very quiet and expressed no radical views during the conference. He was 21 at the time and residing in London. According to the flight schedule he provided the Institute, Abdul Muttalib was in Houston 17 days.
Have you ever seen this man here?
No. Nope. No.
How can you be so sure?
The local Nigerian Muslim Association says it's not aware of its members having any direct or indirect link with the suspect. Worshippers at Houston's largest Nigerian mosque tell me Abdul Muttalib never attended prayers here during his visit.
What could this young man have been doing here?
No one knows.
They tell me they're used to defending their reputation as Muslims after acts of terrorism. But a Nigerian suspect was completely unexpected.
I said, for God's sake, this can't be a Nigerian. I was shocked. In fact, I said, perhaps somebody was just trying to bring a big shame on our country.
Numbering between 100 and 150,000, Houston Nigerians, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, fear a backlash of profiling. Community leaders denounce extremism and have pledged cooperation with the investigation.
So what would drive someone like Abdul Muttalib to sacrifice himself for Islam? Here to help us understand more about the root cause of this radicalization is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser with the American Islamic Forum for Democracy.
And first off, Doctor, what's your response to all this?
Well, I think what we're seeing is people should not be surprised, as much as we've seen 2009, the busiest year since 9/11 in arrests and radicalization. This is a pattern. There's a narrative that's been playing out, and as much as some of the Muslims that were interviewed there are in denial, they say, well, it couldn't have been part of our group, couldn't have been this and that. The problem is that they just don't get it. There is a narrative that's been played out in mosques all over the world and in Muslim communities that says that this is a war against Islam, against Muslims. Not that any of them have ever met any radical or violent Muslims, but there's a narrative that basically says that America is fighting a war against Islam, against Muslims, and there's been no counter to that. And this ideology feeds into a radicalization that we see some of the margins of society. It's not related to poverty, not related to lack of education. This Abdul Muttalib was very educated. The 5 Muslim students that went to Pakistan and were just arrested were very educated. Hassan on Fort Hood was not only educated but well-to-do and from a good family. But there's a narrative there that says that he has to fight for Islam against the Western, secular, godless country. And the mosques and the Islamic organizations are doing very little to counter that narrative.
And it's interesting because I asked you earlier, is it surprising to you that he's Nigerian and, like you mentioned, the different socioeconomics of this? None of it plays a role, really.
It doesn't. It doesn't. This is a war of ideologies between the West, secular society, and theocracy or political Islam. And until we start to get into that, we need to look at this like a Cold War, where we were fighting communism for decades. This is a long war that we need to hunker down and begin to figure out how to win the hearts and minds of Muslims so that they don't become separatist. They don't see society as being against them and with identity problem, but yet this can only be won within Islam. If we view this as a conflict against Islam, we're going to lose and see much more of this. But if we view this as a conflict within Islam for the separation of mosque and state, which is really what our organization does, we will begin to get at the root cause of the problem.
I had asked you earlier about, was it surprising that he came from Yemen? You said no. This points to the fact that it's much larger than we initially thought.
Exactly. I mean, these organizations, Al-Qaeda, Abdul Sahab out of Somalia, this Imam Awlaki, who was feeding ideas to Hassan in Fort Hood and was found to be feeding ideas to Abdul Muttalib, was based in Yemen. And this was a society that felt a kinship to some of the separatism between Islam and the West, and they were able to set up shop. And finally now, and this is something we said right after the Fort Hood incident, was we should go into Yemen and target this imam and find him and extract him, and because this is a military target, and sure enough, they did that a week ago.
Why do you think we're seeing a rise in the number of men who are getting into this radicalized Islamic, view and falling into that?
Because we think that somehow there's a short-term fix, that we can just get out of Afghanistan or get out of Iraq, and that's going to solve the problem. The kids that are now 20, 25 were 12, 13 at 9/11, and that narrative of a war against Islam, between America and the Islamic world, is now played out in their minds. Even the Islamic groups in America that are nonviolent and condemn terrorism still push forth the ideas that this is their victims, that they're going to be profiled, that this is a global conflict against being Muslim, rather than them taking the lead and saying, we want to live in countries that are based on liberty, separation of mosque and state, and until they change that narrative, you're going to start to see much more of this. I mean, Europe has been dealing with this radicalization for decades because they've had much more of a higher percentage of Muslims trying to assimilate into their society and having these conflicts from terror to honor killing and other issues.
In this incident, of course, he snuck past a TSA security gate. A lot of questions being raised about if passengers should be racially profiled.
You know, it's interesting. You talk of the word profiling. To me, it's almost un-American, because you want to. It means that you're identifying people based on race or ethnicity, and that's against our First Amendment. Having said that, if somebody escapes into a neighborhood and the police knows that they're hiding in that neighborhood, it's not profiling to knock on doors and make sure that because there's probable cause there. Similarly, our tax money would be ill-advised to be treating everybody exactly the same at the airport. I, as a Muslim, my first name is Muhammad, I expect that they're going to be looking with more scrutiny into my background than somebody else who may not have a similar. I mean, 99% of terror incidents in the past 10 years have been from those of Islamic origin, and we need to recognize that we're going to be more scrutinized. Now, does that mean there shouldn't be probable cause? No, there should be probable cause, but that's not profiling. That's smart police work that looks at behavior, looks at ideology, and also religious ideas are part of that.
What I think folks have to understand is that the threat of Islamic extremism, it's here, it's there, and we're facing it. So we need these steps.
Exactly. There's a change of the way of life. We need to begin to understand it. And having said that on profiling, if we start changing the fabric of the pluralistic aspect of our society and the U.S. Constitution, we would have lost this war, and that's exactly what Al-Qaeda wants. So we have to be careful, to be smart with security, but also to not change the fabric of the way we treat all those of all faiths in America.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Jasser, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We sure appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We're going to switch gears here now and switch to the Fiesta Bowl parade.